Have you ever noticed how Encanto makes us believe that Pepa Madrigal has no control over the weather? Every time she feels a strong emotion, the sky immediately reflects her feelings, seemingly out of her control. If she's stressed, a storm breaks out. If she's happy, the sun shines. But what if that's only part of the story? What if Pepa actually can fully control the weather, but was taught to believe that her gift is just a reflection of her emotions? Before we dive into Pepa's gift in detail, we need to understand a very important pattern within the Madrigal family, the relationship between their gifts and their emotions. If we pay close attention, we'll notice that every family member has amazing abilities, but they don't always work the way they expect. There's a clear connection between emotions and how well they control their gifts, but that doesn't mean their powers are uncontrollable. Let's start with Isabella, the perfect daughter. She believed her gift was to create flawless plants and flowers, but in a moment of frustration, she creates something completely different: a wild, spiky cactus. That moment proves her gift wasn't limited to perfection. She had just been conditioned to believe that. Another example, Camilo. He can shapeshift effortlessly, but during the dinner scene when Bruno's vision is revealed, he transforms uncontrollably, taking on unexpected shapes, like a chameleon. What does that tell us? That in moments of intense emotion, his gift reacts instinctively, but that doesn't mean he can't control it with practice. And then there's Luisa, always strong and unbreakable, until she starts doubting herself and realizes her strength is tied to the pressure she feels. When that pressure becomes too much, her gift starts to fail. So, the Madrigal's powers are deeply influenced by their emotions. But that doesn't mean they're out of control. Which brings us to a big question. Why would it be any different with Pepa? What if the only reason she loses control of the weather is because she believes she can't control it? The answer might lie in how Abuela raised each of the Madrigals, and especially in how Pepa was taught to deal with her emotions. If there's one thing Encanto makes crystal clear, it's that the Madrigal family lives under constant pressure to be perfect. And that pressure comes directly from Abuela, who believes the family's gifts must be used solely to help the community, with no room for mistakes, flaws, or moments of weakness. Now, imagine growing up in that environment with a gift that's directly tied to your emotions. From a young age, Pepa probably heard things like, "Calm down, Pepa," or "Don't get nervous, or you'll cause a storm." That means instead of being taught to develop and refine her gift, she was taught to suppress her emotions. But there's an even crueler detail in this story. The other Madrigal's gifts still function even when they're emotionally unstable. Julieta, for instance, can heal people with her food regardless of how she feels. Luisa doesn't need to be confident to be strong. Bruno gets visions even when he's clearly anxious. So why is it that only Pepa's gift is supposedly uncontrollable? The answer might lie in how she was conditioned. Unlike Isabella, who discovered the truth about her power once she broke free from everyone's expectations, Pepa never had that moment of realization. She spent her whole life trying to avoid letting her emotions cause storms, instead of learning how to work with them. What if the problem was never a lack of control, but a lack of confidence? Deep down, Pepa might have believed so strongly that her gift was only driven by emotions that she never even tried to use it consciously. That would explain why, in the few moments when she's genuinely happy, she's able to create positive weather effects, like in the final scene of the movie. What would have happened if Pepa had experienced the same kind of growth as Isabella? What if, instead of bottling up her feelings, she embraced them and started exploring her gift's full potential? If Pepa truly had no control over her gift, we'd expect it to always manifest in chaotic, unpredictable ways, right? But what if I told you that Encanto actually gives us clues that Pepa already has more control than we think? At the end of the film, when the casita is rebuilt and the Madrigal family comes together, Pepa is dancing joyfully with Felix. And during this happy moment, little pieces of hail start to appear around her. But wait, if her gift were purely emotional and uncontrollable, why would a weather phenomenon show up during a moment of pure joy? This shows us that Pepa, maybe without even realizing it, could already be manipulating the weather more consciously than we thought. The hail doesn't show up because she's nervous or upset. It happens while she's having fun. If it were just about emotions, that moment should have brought a clear, sunny sky, right? But what we see is something different, a weather event not triggered by a negative emotion. This could mean that Pepa already has control over her gift. She just never had the space to truly explore it. Another important detail is how Pepa reacts to her own weather changes. When Mirabel brings up the wedding at the beginning of the movie, Pepa instantly creates a storm cloud, but instead of panicking, Felix calms her down and the cloud disappears. This could mean that she already knows how to settle the weather, but was conditioned to believe that her emotions would always have an inevitable impact. If we think about Isabella's evolution throughout the film, we realize that she believed she could only grow perfect flowers, because that's what she was taught to think. But once she breaks free from the family's expectations, she discovers she can grow any kind of plant. So, what if the same idea applied to Pepa? If she had been encouraged to explore her gift freely, without fear of messing up or being judged, maybe she would have already known that total control was always within her reach. What if, instead of being a chaotic power, Pepa's gift is actually one of the strongest in the entire family? If Pepa were to fully master her ability, her powers could go far beyond what we see in Encanto. Imagine a version of her who doesn't just react emotionally to the weather, but who can control the elements of nature with intention. She could, for example, bring rain to crops when needed, ensuring perfect harvests for the village. If there's a celebration, she could make the sun shine without worrying about her emotional state. And even more than that, she could create strategic weather effects, like a cool breeze on hot days or snow in the winter to balance the temperature. If there's ever a sequel to Encanto, we might get to see Pepa exploring the true potential of her gift, just like Isabella did when she realized she could create more than just pretty flowers. Maybe Pepa's biggest obstacle was never a lack of control, but the way she was taught to see her gift. Instead of viewing it as something powerful, she spent her whole life believing it was an emotional curse. If she ever realizes that the power was in her hands all along, she could become one of the most important and powerful madrigals in the entire village. If you liked this theory and believe Pepa could be way more powerful than we ever imagined, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel and lets me know you want more theories like this one. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to hit subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss any new theory about Encanto and other amazing animated films. Now, if you want to keep exploring this magical universe full of mysteries, go ahead and click the video on the final screen. I'm sure you're going to love it. See you there!